Which one's the best crypto asset? Well, Bitcoin's the best crypto asset. Okay. What's the second best? There is no second best. There's no second best crypto asset. There's a crypto asset. It's called Bitcoin, right?
Welcome to the Why Bitcoin Show. It's a weekly podcast on why Bitcoin matters and how it's helping individuals from all walks of life achieve true financial and individual sovereignty. Bitcoin embodies real financial empowerment, and compared to all other investment choices, there really is no second best. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Why Bitcoin Show. Very pleased to introduce my next guest, Emma Apatu. Welcome.
Thank you, Dale. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, I suppose it's a pleasure to be here for the second time, although nobody's heard you speak because for some or other ungodly reason, things did not work out the first time. And, I did an episode last week, which was all about I've just done 2 years of podcasting, and in 2 years, I hadn't screwed things up in that regard. So I'm sorry for being the first. Let's make sure this one actually lasts and there are no silly errors along the way. But yeah, it's been great sort of knowing you in the relatively short space of time I've known you. And we did chat about some great stuff on the last one, but as you know, as just mentioned, it never got out. So we're going to repeat ourselves to an extent, but perhaps given where we are today, 28th of May, we might touch on a few different other topics that I guess perhaps are a bit relevant. So um, let's just kind of zoom out and do a quick introduction as to kind of who you are and what it is that you find yourself doing today. And then we'll kind of weave in a bit of Bitcoin magic.
Yeah, so I'm Emma Apatu. I wear various hats, but I can start with I am a professor at a local university in Canada, and I teach and lead research around actually Bitcoin and health right now. I have a master's of public health student, and we're trying to look at the associations of Bitcoin adoption and health outcomes, and also social outcomes as well too, because as you may know, Dale, and I'm sure we can maybe relate on other people's stories as well, that there's this kind of very interesting thing that when you start um, putting your life on a Bitcoin standard, people not only try to improve their finances, they also address their dietary habits and also perspectives, which those perspectives could be healthier ones than they held before. So there's something I think unique there with Bitcoin adoption. So I've recently kind of shifted because I think it's a fascinating topic area. I came to Bitcoin in 2021. Like many people, I think the recent pandemic was like this earthquake that made people realize that there were cracks in the foundations of many areas of life, including the economy and maybe even personally. And so for me, it was a really interesting time where I really questioned some of the prevailing models that I held deeply about the world, about, the way that I perceive my position in the world as well too. And it ultimately led me to Bitcoin. I had various kind of like frameworks, one particularly in health promotion. We talk about the Friedman health pyramid, impact pyramid. And this is where the bottom of the health impact pyramid is the socioeconomic factors. And then you move up to clinical care, and it's at the bottom where you could make the most impact in population health, because everyone needs access to a socioeconomic system, money, etc. And I was like, wow, really, no one is talking about, trying to heal our monetary system and, from a healthcare, public health perspective. And so I've moved into that space, as I mentioned, where I mentor students, and this is relatively new as well, this whole research program around that. And we're on the Bitcoin mentor team together. So I do one-on-one trainings and also community-based Bitcoin beginner education.
Wow, that's really cool to hear. Like just all the different things you're doing. Let's dive into a little bit about the sort of Bitcoin and health because there is something unique about Bitcoin that has a quasi-religious aspect to it, which is it's not just about saving the best money. Suddenly, when people become Bitcoiners, and I distinguish a Bitcoiner from a person who just buys Bitcoin, it's like they jump into the ideological side of things. It impacts all sorts of other aspects of your life, including the way you think about health. And for a lot of Bitcoiners, they don't even want to touch vegetables, as an example, because it's all about the carnivore diet and things like that. Um, Talk to us a little bit about that desire of Bitcoiners to kind of, I don't know, seek truth or question prevailing narratives, or what is it about Bitcoiners or that really has us challenging all these conventional norms and sort of turning them on their head? And is that always a good idea?
Yeah, maybe I'll start with the second point first. Like, is it always a good idea? Maybe not, because you really could be um, you know, just questioning to the point where you just don't believe anything and you can cripple yourself with action. So I think it is good to question, but maybe to an extent. So you could still keep a level head. And I think my initial hunch would tell me that once people have done the work to first start understanding Bitcoin, you go on a personal journey. And I think what you connect to is this sense of self-sovereignty. You realize, oh, wow, I essentially can be my own bank. I don't have to, worry about a third party. And in many ways, it's what we've done with our health. We've exported it to third parties where we believe, doctors have all of the power and, admittedly, they've trained very hard and many have our best interests, but at the same time, we as individuals should, have the best, we have the best knowledge of ourselves in terms of how we feel. The medical profession should, in a sense, be more of a guide. And so I think um, it's that sense of self-sovereignty that leads Bitcoiners to areas of health.
As you may know, I've partnered with the legends at Bitcoin Mentor, headed by BTC Sessions, to look after the Australian market. And we're laser focused on helping you get your coins off of exchange and into self custody. Wherever you are in your journey, whether you're just getting started or you're advanced and you're looking to up your game, we've got the skills, knowledge, and experience to get you on your way towards true ownership and sovereignty. Personally, I believe that if you require cooperation or permission from any third party to move your coins, then you're not really self sovereign and you don't actually truly own your own Bitcoin. In fact, in that case, I think you may as well just own the ETF. Self custody isn't as difficult as some people make it out to be, and I'm very passionate about helping people who care about sovereignty take control of their Bitcoin. If you're interested in finding out more about how we can help you, hit me up at dale@bitcoinmentor.io, or you can book a session with me. The link is in the show notes. Now, back to the show.
Sometimes we can cripple ourselves by being asking too many questions, questioning things too much. It can be difficult to do that when when you dig a little bit deeper on so many different topics and you just uncover, I guess, the fact that conventional wisdom is so often wrong. And whether that's relating to health outcomes, whether that's relating to, like, let's say, media, where lies are just peddled over and over and over and over again. And I think it was like Hitler who said something along the lines of that, like, if you repeat a lie often enough, the people believe it, kind of thing. And so there's all sorts of lies that have been peddled by mainstream media over the years that ultimately have led me to kind of come to the conclusion that they don't care about what's true. They care more about ratings and clicks. And once you experience that, then suddenly you go, fake news. I don't want to believe a single thing, because it's all nonsense. It doesn't seem to make sense. Just yesterday, we'll use a little example. I saw that Emmanuel Macron got off the plane and his wife gave him a light slap in the face. Now, on X, you can see it, and it looks as if, his wife's giving him a bit of a, shut your mouth, boy, kind of slap. He then, calls it Russian disinformation, Russian propaganda. Just a few weeks ago, the same guy was on a train. He had what was potentially a tissue, according to some reports, but actually others said a bag of cocaine. So you're like, what do we believe here anymore? Like, I don't know. And the thing is, sometimes the truth is stranger than fiction. So, I think it's almost like an immune response that Bitcoiners have to just being told what to do. And it's like, no, 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 I'll go figure it out. But then it leads you down all the weirdest paths. Like maybe you've heard this one. Emmanuel Macron is married to his dad. Have you heard that? You know what I mean? It's like, so then it's
I've
like,
heard some really strange things. Yeah.
I know you probably didn't expect us to go down that path, but it's kind of weird because then it was like, is it maybe? I mean, it's not beyond the pale. It could actually be true. So then I have to find out, okay, is he still alive? Because you can't have like he can't be married to this, this person who's potentially his dad, as well as his dad living some separate life. Well, yeah. So you have to look at this stuff. So anyway, I digress. Let's talk more about public health, okay? Because I liked what you were speaking about with the pyramid and saying that the biggest determinant of public health outcomes is that sort of base layer of the social fabric, I guess, things like inequality, stuff like that. Let's just make that connection for people who haven't kind of put the dots together yet. Maybe I'm one of them in terms of how something like a Bitcoin standard would provide like a really good bedrock. And then talk to us also about the other aspects of that pyramid, just so that we can kind of start seeing. Because I'm imagining like a Maslow's hierarchy of needs type thing.
Yeah, so essentially that base layer, I would say it relates to something called the social determinants of health. You might have heard that term. It's quite popular in public health because it relates to the majority of factors that shape our health. So your environment, like whether you have access to a park, for example, to, safely walk in for recreation. It also includes housing as well too. So we know housing is important. And then you can think of money as well as one of those determinants. So you can think of it as essentially the things that help us live our lives, and that's from an environmental perspective, and that's also from a social economic perspective. And so that's just foundational. And if we can address those things, so for example, and I think this is true where you're based in Australia, like housing is like a major problem, especially let's say for young people who are looking to get into the housing market. And so if you can't find like affordable shelter, for example, how are you then going to start your life, if you will, if you're a young person? So it's like that those fundamental things that we need to live our lives and protect our health. So moving up the pyramid, so we have these like social economic factors that includes the social determinants, as I mentioned. And then you move up to things such as, for example, education. Health education is great. You can teach people kind of like, what is, and through experience, people learn what is healthy, for them. And, take a child and put their finger on a hot plate, or they put their finger and then they'll learn like not to do that again. So health education is also part of it, and it's kind of like higher up in the rung. And then clinical care. There's five levels, and so I might be mislabeling these levels, but I'm just giving you like a general sense. And
Yes.
clinical care, as you know, is more of like up there, like the tip of the pyramid is essentially where you're talking about like one-on-one clinical care. And so a doctor rather can only interact usually with one patient at a time. And so that is not addressing population outcomes, right? Like that doctor isn't addressing like community level things. Whereas if you put a park in a neighborhood potentially where that really needs one, then that could potentially improve health outcomes. I mean, we can argue, the context of that community, but it at least could provide an environment where, the outdoor elements could be more reachable, for example, where people can enjoy and improve their health. So yeah, it's really that base layer that makes up those factors, those important
Yeah.
factors. And then it just builds up to essentially clinical care, like more one-on-one services.
Yes, that makes perfect sense. Okay, and I suppose then the argument is that if you've got something like Bitcoin, which, and let's just focus on housing for a moment, if people were able to save in a currency that didn't inflate away and that enabled them to plan for the future, then they have kind of more certainty over what the future looks like. And as a result, like, you can argue that there's better, I mean, public health outcomes in the sense of mental health. Like, I think that for young people here in Australia, a lot of people are feeling terribly disenfranchised because they kind of go, I don't know what I can look forward to because if I don't have what they call the bank of mum and dad here, which is mum and dad who've got a ton of equity in their property, who can then draw down on that and put down a deposit on the property. If you don't have that here, it is incredibly challenging. So it's not as if, oh, well, that just means you're going to rent for the rest of your life. No, no, no. It's everything. It's whether you rent, whether you buy, it's obscenely expensive relative to wages. And so perhaps something like Bitcoin can help you. I actually, for my sins, I mean, I'm still interested in real estate to an extent because I live in a home and, ultimately, like, ultimately, I want to see the value go up, right? I mean, that's just human nature. So I popped in at an auction the other day and I see a young guy, and part of what they do at the auctions is they like now offering free drinks and snacks. And so the neighbors get round and, get a vibe going. So there's this young guy there, and I'm like, so, are you just getting into the industry? Just like, let's have a little chat. And he's like, no, no, no. Yeah, I'm doing this every weekend because I want to save up to buy myself a home, but I can't get a home. So I'm trying to get an apartment. So, there's other people that are kind of interfering and talking to him, and I kind of go and take a seat back with my wife, and I'm like, check out this DCA calculator. 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. This guy would be up so far if he just figured out Bitcoin. But the road between where he is and where he needs to get to in order to have that conviction is really long. And I suppose that's one of the things. So when you think about the educational work that you do, how do we get people from a place of feeling, I guess, really disenfranchised, listless, etc., to a point where they've now invested the time to be able to understand the tool that could improve their life?
Yeah, maybe if I can take that more from a policy perspective.
Yes, go
So
for
I
it.
do sit on Bitcoin Coalition Canada with some incredible people. And Scott Wolf, who leads Bitcoin Coalition Canada, and the team came out with a report of like four recommendations for Canada specifically. And one is to implement a diminished tax exemption for transactions under 10,000. So and also eliminate capital gains tax on Bitcoin held for more than 1 year. So imagine like for that disenfranchised person, if they were able to actually like hold this and know that, the new had a transparent kind of policy structure where they could plan for the future and in a monies that would actually increase over time. I mean, I think that would be a total game changer. And then I think from there, this could create more of a climate where people might be eager to learn about Bitcoin. Like right now, from my experience, it's really grassroots, and you probably have seen this also in, for example, South Africa, where people might have at first a very poor perception of Bitcoin, but it's through maybe outreach from, let's say, Bitcoin Academy or in this case, maybe Bitcoin Coalition Canada, people can change their perceptions. And I think it's through grassroots, because as you know, Bitcoin is a very, bottom up a thing where that could really help to move education forward. I'm not sure if that really answers your question, but I
Yeah.
think adding the policy in would be important.
I mean, it would. Unfortunately, politicians tend to be fairly self-interested in my experience. And I mean, firstly, they're a little bit arrogant to even contemplate something like Bitcoin as a starting point. That's what I've just seen. Secondly, their time horizons are fairly short. And so something what you're describing is what a benevolent dictator would do. Xi Jinping would probably be more inclined to do that than Anthony Albanese here in Australia, and maybe even dear Mark Carney, because they can think beyond their nose. And when I think of that policy, I go, yeah, that works. I mean, it's funny to people like us in places like Canada and Australia, where we're just cousins. Funnily enough, I mean, you're our northern cousin in the sense that everything's very similar. Say, I mean, our historical background. I mean, the weather's the only main sort of major difference, but the obsession with housing, the cost of living, etc., like and things like that. But there are parts of the world where if you hold Bitcoin for more than 12 months, it's tax free, like in Germany. I mean, a lot of people don't actually realize that. So if you've done fairly well in Bitcoin, Germany's not a bad place to live. Cost of living is pretty cheap. I don't know if you've spent any time there, but it's one of the cheapest places in Europe I've been to. Don't necessarily love it, but for some people that actually works super well. Whereas here, if you're a top earner, and let's say if you're earning more than 180,000 Aussie dollars, and you hold your Bitcoin in your personal capacity, you're paying 45 cents on the dollar for every single gain you make, dollar the gain you make. So it's like, it's a little bit of a disincentive. So it's like, okay, I see. So I take my after tax money, I take all the risk, and then if I enjoy the rewards, you clip the ticket to the tune of 45%. And so $180,000 sounds like a ton of money, but actually, it's particularly since 2020, it's not as much as people think. Like, you know, six figures was a pretty decent income when I was, in 2019-ish. Now, there's guys that are getting that doing that are that are baristas, literally, in parts of Australia because they literally can't get people. So it's quite remarkable. But I do tend to agree with those, and I actually would love to dig into the Bitcoin policy side of things a bit more because we have something similar here to an extent. It's called ABIB, the Australian Bitcoin Industry Body, and they've got a whole policy statement about some of the key outcomes they want. I think ultimately, yes, capital gains tax free would be great, de minimis amounts, so that you can actually just get rid of that headache in the back of your mind that every time you transact in Bitcoin, which is what it's supposed to be, that you're not going to have the tax office come 5 years later and go, can you account for that $3,000? But yeah, I think broadly speaking, what they want to do is separate Bitcoin from crypto. Is that something that you guys are working on? Because in the policymakers' brains here, it's like you can't even begin to discuss the difference. They just don't get it.
Yeah, I think that in general for people first learning, like it gets so confounded and it's almost like a mind virus when people hear Bitcoin. It's like the other side it comes out like crypto. Yeah, so a big piece of kind of what we do is education and essentially like we just went through an election. And so, sending our local members of parliament, for example, what our stance is and trying to understand like the various parties' stances on what Bitcoin is and trying to educate them. The higher kind of administration and the coalition really did a lot of that work, but yeah, education is a big piece, and we're hoping to just further that work so people can understand the difference between Bitcoin and crypto.
Yeah. Now, when you think about the stuff that you do, all the energy you put into something like Bitcoin, it's not just, oh, this is a career, this is fun. It's like I was in law, I was in property, I've been in software, I've been in media, I've done all these things, but nothing's been as exciting, all right? And I'm trying to just, I'd love to kind of get your take on what it is about Bitcoin specifically, because it's obviously self-sovereignty. It's all these things wrapped up in one. But why do you care so much about this thing? Because you probably sound crazy to friends and family.
Yeah, I would think there's probably various reasons. I think one, and I think this is a common trait among Bitcoiners, is that like this like insatiable desire to just learn. And Bitcoin is such an amazing tool to do that because as you know, you need to know economics and technology, computer science, like all of these different fields. And like I have learned more about economics than I've ever had, in my life. And I was telling someone the other day that if I learned about the Austrian school, oh my goodness, I think I might have like studied that as a major in school, for example. So I think it's curiosity, like selfishly, I just love to learn. And I think another reason is like, for example, like my parents, amazing role models, very hardworking people. And to see that they worked all their lives and, at a good chunk of their lives, there wasn't an alternative that they could invest in.
Mm.
Um, and so I think I'm very passionate about that, like building and, for my future family, for example, hopefully having a better foundation, like a stronger foundation. So I think that those are major driving factors. And I think also, as I mentioned, like in health and public health, looking at sound money, I think is a very under-examined topic, especially as it relates to Bitcoin. And it's just an innate passion that I have within me, to see how I can have a little, impact on people around me and the educational community that I interact with.
Yeah. Yeah, all of that resonates absolutely. Funnily enough, let's talk about a bunch of them. So the one is I can't read fiction. And it's because I just want to learn. And I was just speaking to my mum
Same
yesterday, and I was like, I
here.
don't get it. I just don't. I used to read things like Shantaram and The Kite Runner and all the stuff when I was young, but then as I've gotten older, like I think, post university, I can't pick up a book that's fiction. So I'm always learning. I have to read minimum 30 minutes a day, and it's only so that I can actually get to sleep, quite frankly, because yeah, a day without my Kindle next to me is a day that I don't sleep. So, and I'm always learning. And then you take something like, Austrian economics, which is intuitively so easy to understand. And I'm putting together like a What is Money series. Like I'm not going to compete with Breedlove, but it's more a case of like trying to explain Bitcoin for beginners. And you just start right at the beginning and you talk about the bartering and the proto monies. And, so you had the rye stones and you had the bees and the salt and the cattle. And then eventually, like, we had to come to some sort of agreement on an indirect good that sort of we both valued because I didn't always want your apples and you don't always want my chickens or whatever the case would be. And like this is really easy to understand and kind of just it just ticks that box of like intuitively easy. And then you chuck in, no, 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 that's all garbage. Actually, what matters is we need central planners who are like engineers who can control the financial system and they'll push this lever and pull this lever and they'll be like, okay, well, we need to make money cheap so that people want to invest in businesses. And so we need a little bit of inflation, not too much though, because that gets problematic and creates inequality, but about 2%. Why 2%? I don't know. We just agree. And everyone just buys into this delusion. And it's sort of like, in some ways, people that are uneducated are actually better equipped to grok Bitcoin than people who are in mainstream finance because you've got to just unlearn all this stuff that is not, it's not what you think that is so, it's what you think that is so that just isn't so kind of thing, if that makes sense.
Totally. Yeah. Going in with a blank slate would be so much easier. And I think, relating it back to like healthcare, In my field, a lot of people that are passionate about social determinants of health talk about income all the time. Like, in order to, close the gaps, people just need more income. And I'm thinking in my head, well, no, that's not going to solve the problem if we still run on a fiat standard, right? And it's not to say Bitcoin is going to ease all of the inequalities in the world. I don't think so. At least I think it will set us in a direction where um, everyone would be able to fairly access a financial system based on, the value they provide to society. Um, yeah.
Absolutely. Because often you find that you've got these, I don't want to call them just rent seekers, but so much of it's the economy has been financialized in the sense that it's hard for some people to understand what value they add. Like I remember I had a friend who was an intraday trader, and I was just like, so what are you doing? Okay, well, we buy this, and sometimes we go long, sometimes we go short, and sometimes we hold for 1 minute, sometimes 2 hours. Okay, and what are you doing as opposed to actually building something kind of productive? And I just thought of an analogy as you're talking about the blank slate thing, which is like whether you're playing, I don't know what sports you play, Emma, but it's like maybe, whether it's a team sport, whether it's an individual sport, like let's imagine like baseball or cricket or something like martial arts. If you take someone who's been kind of just mucking around with dad in the backyard, for like 5 years. And you're like, okay, no, but your form is wrong and you're not quite doing this, or, you're throwing your punches wrong. That's really hard to rewire that brain, as opposed to taking like a 3-year-old girl who does none of it and just goes, right, you stand like this, you swing like this, you do whatever. And those kind of those neural pathways get entrenched right from day one properly. And because I've got all these terrible habits of when comes to the way I hit a ball, the way that I throw a punch, because I've just mucked around in my garage. Do you know what I mean? So maybe that's an analogy I should run with in the future.
You totally should. That's a great one. I used to play basketball and I'm naturally right-handed, but I train myself to be, well, I don't think we'll ever, well, maybe one day we will shoot some basketballs around together with the mentor team. Um, but yeah, I train myself to be left-handed. And it's because like I was able to do that because to your point, like I did that at the beginning stages of my learning. And if I didn't do that, later, then I probably would have been right-handed. Nothing wrong with that. But I think I just had a fascination with, just becoming like the unpredictable lefty.
I love it. I know. Lefties do well in every sport, generally. Fighters, cricket players. Yeah, I think because there's just something different. And I don't know what percentage of the population they comprise, but yeah, I always wished I was a left arm bowler in cricket. Just to talk a little bit about Bitcoin specific stuff now, the work you're doing from an education perspective, obviously I'm aware of what you're up to at Bitcoin Mentor and in terms of the coaching you deliver for self-custody stuff. But with Dream Grad Academy, I'd love to just get your take on kind of, yeah, what it is that you're actually doing. Um, and yeah, just talk to us about that. Because by the way, when I say Dream Grad Academy, try and say that fast 5 times.
Yeah, that's a tough one. So basically, the idea behind Dream Grad Academy was born in 2024. So it's very new. And the goal is to serve organizations and communities and then have the partnership with Bitcoin Mentor for individuals that want to level up their self-custody game, etc., to move in that direction. So essentially, with Dream Grad Academy, we work with community-based organizations to do like one-on-one Bitcoin kind of like seminars. So, for example, I have this contract that hopefully will be finalized working with a local Indigenous community who wants to learn more about Bitcoin and so that they can be more, self-sovereign from a monetary perspective. And they'll learn essentially, like what Bitcoin is and see if it is something that they want to integrate into their financial business. So that's an example of like the type of kind of community organization that I work with. Also, yeah, I would say that that's the primary use case at this time. I have applied for Dream Grad Academy to be a light node in the my first Bitcoin network of educators. So I should find out soon if we're accepted. So essentially, hopefully that will increase our visibility and we could do more community-based trainings across Canada. And given that Dream Grad is virtual, then it could be for other community organizations that resonate with the education that we'll offer, and we'll base it off of the Premier Bitcoin.
Awesome. Okay, so I suppose there's a role for all different types of education within the space. To an extent, you know, we tend to work with folks who are allocating at Bitcoin Mentor in relative size, whereas what Dream Grad Academy, I won't say that again, appears to be doing is more community outreach, really trying to just create like broad scale awareness. And it feels like it's more about people who you would regard as they kind of need Bitcoin more. Like everyone needs Bitcoin, but there are, I think, certain groups that I think could benefit more than others.
Agreed. And also like a big niche that I'm trying to reach is like the nonprofit space as well. Because, for example, in Canada, a lot of funding is being dried up, from the federal level. And I would assume that's the same in the States, for example, with all of the budget cuts that have been going on there. So just being able to reach, especially the CEOs of some of these nonprofits, to see, hey, there's this new thing that you could, put in the treasury for your nonprofit, or, but it just starts with what is Bitcoin? Like that's really, really where I'm trying to get to. A training that I did do for a nonprofit last year was great. There was a bunch of these like young women leaders. They came from all over the world and just did a basic like one-on-one what is Bitcoin for them. And the ladies were able to run with it and see how it might help in their local context.
Awesome. Yeah, I think when it comes to these nonprofits, uh, it is potential to be a game changer, obviously, in terms of being able to accept Bitcoin from people across the world. I suppose sometimes the fiat rails can be quite cumbersome and to get money across borders, etc. And there's so many people clipping the ticket. Like I've got we call it like a direct debit just coming out of a card that I've got. And I know I'm paying 2% to support like this charity in South Africa focused on helping lions, leopards, and tigers that have been rescued from abusive situations in zoos where they've had their claws removed and all that. And it's like a retirement home for big cats. I love big cats. I'm so obsessed with them. Um, so that's the thing. But I just think like, oh, the road is so long to get them to accept Bitcoin. There is a guy actually who I'll give him a shout out here. He's Ben, who actually is the CTO of Aqua, Samson Mao's Aqua. He is very partial to my homeland, South Africa. In fact, he's worked very closely with a elephant-focused charity there. I believe it's called Indlovu or something to that effect. Like I think it means elephants in one of the local languages. Needless to say, they have been trying to get the charity to adopt a Bitcoin standard. However, if you just were to go in cold and say to someone, by the way, look, if you were to accept Bitcoin and let's say you spent 90% of it and you save 10% of it, look what it does over these years. It's like going to a charity and saying, by the way, we've got Netflix. You should buy some Netflix. Like honestly, they don't know where to begin. So, I mean, I don't know. Have you got any any success stories or any tips or thoughts around how you would go about trying to get a non-profit to kind of look beyond the fact that it's a speculative investment and that it's just deflationary money that you can save in. Because it's a hard sell, and we don't want to sell.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's kind of like trying to orange pill individuals. It's like you kind of have to meet people where they are and use situations or things that they're familiar with. So if it's a nonprofit related to, let's say, women, for example, you could give the examples of, maybe a single mother who's trying to save for her child's future, to highlight that longer time horizon. And if she was able to save for 4 years or more, in Bitcoin for her child, like that would be a really nice, kind of nest egg. And that's something similar you could do for your company as well too. Like you could have this asset and then you can show, I think a good graphic to sometimes show is the Federal Reserve CPI, like purchasing, or rather purchasing power of the US dollar
Hmm.
against Bitcoin over time. And I just asked, like, what would you rather save in? Like, this is the US dollar, yes, but you could essentially put any other fiat currency and it's a similar trend. And, Bitcoin's going up into the right. And so that usually, like, oh, that's interesting. Like, I never thought about that. But admittedly, usually when you use that kind of framing, it takes time for them to kind of digest that and to go through that, the personal frameworks that they've had all the time that are like, oh, we should be saving in dollars. Like there's that cognitive dissonance and like, how can I then do that for my nonprofit? I think giving space during that time and just saying, hey, if you want to like brainstorm further ideas, here are some of the things that, Dream Grad or the partnership with Bitcoin Mentor we can help you with.
Yeah.
Because I'm not a tax person or, an accountant or whatever. So I don't want to get into it at that level, but at least get them at the door to start thinking about it, understanding the basics, and then helping them along in those, other considerations.
Totally. There we go. Wonderful. Mic drop moments. There we go. A mic
Boom.
slap. But that's exactly right. I mean, I'm thinking like, even if you've got like any business, and let's say you've got a long-term horizon with this business, and you want to invest in capex in the future, and you're thinking like you want to keep up with the times, you want to, whatever it is, expand your business. It doesn't matter. You want to hire some AI specialist because that's kind of the direction that you're going in, or you got to invest in some automation or robotics or something. It's like it just makes it's such a no-brainer, I think, for any public or private company to have a portion of their savings denominated in Bitcoin. And I think what we're seeing with the likes of, I guess, strategy, and then the copycats around the world, Metaplanet, and popping up all over the show, like each public market is going to have their star who employs that strategy. And I mean, I was looking at some data last night, and you've got to kind of stop doing this in Bitcoin, where you got to kind of you don't ever just got to stop chasing the shiny new thing. And this is what I've kind of promised myself in this cycle. But I think Meta Planet is up something like 217,000% since they implemented this strategy. Which, if you had the foresight to put $100, $1,000 in there, I mean, honestly. But the same can be said about Trump coin, initially. So it's like a very different
Yes.
proposition, but you got to just start thinking in reality, like, it's not the norm to have that happen, but it's something that I'm really conscious of because in this cycle, I'm so tempted to diversify by trying to chase something a little bit faster because I don't want to say Bitcoin's boring because it still could do something pretty exceptional. But there are potentially these opportunities in other public markets where things are going to go a bit crazy. Now, let's talk about that volatility point when you're talking to people, because that's obviously one of the things people look at is the price. They go, it's expensive, and you go, no, well, it's divisible by 100 million, and there's only 21 million. The denominator is 21 million. If you looked at these others, they wouldn't be as cheap. They wouldn't be 0.0001 cents. there's all that kind of stuff. But how do people deal with this volatility piece? Because it's just something that comes up over and over again. And I've got an interesting insight from someone from Zimbabwe that I'll share after your answer.
Yeah, well, I usually kind of talk about like Bitcoin being a new thing being adopted. And so it's kind of like, Sailor likes to say, volatility is vitality. So, right, you look at a little baby, like they're crying, they're wiggling all over the place. That's vitality. And so, when the baby grows, like they learn to, in a sense, I guess, conform and not cry for everything, and they kind of stabilize in their actions and their mood to some extent. And that's kind of like Bitcoin. Like it's this new thing, like, trying to evolve into maybe a mature, I think we're at teenager stage now, right? So um, over time, I think, it will get into that more stable state. So I kind of like describe it like that. So we're kind of in this price discovery phase, which, the market doesn't really know how to price it. And you have traders and you have all sorts of people, trying to short, do all these things. And so, yes, it's going to be volatile in the short term, but hopefully over time it should be more stable. And I think also, I think maybe to your point, it depends on your lens, right? So like probably somewhere in Zimbabwe, like volatility of Bitcoin versus, is it the shilling or is it
It's the Zimbabwean dollar, but
the
you can see
dollar?
where that
Yeah.
argument is going. Totally.
Yeah. So it depends totally on your perspective as well, too. That's another thing to consider.
100%. I had a client the other day, and he was saying, "Oh, nobody wants to talk about Bitcoin in Zimbabwe, or at least where I am. They always say it's too volatile." And I was like, "Have you seen the Zimbabwean dollar?" Um, but you wouldn't believe how appropriate your analogy of a crying baby who's just got no emotional regulation is, because I've been up since 4 a.m. I don't know what's going on, but my baby is going through a regressive period. And like, it's amazing. My sense of humor goes out the bloody window. And I really want to be patient and kind. And this morning, I'm just like, I just want to go to sleep, lady. It's 2 days in a row, 4 a.m. And you've been such an angel. And everyone goes, babies are hard. And I go, not mine. Mine sleeps till 6:30, goes to bed at 6, wakes up at 6:30 in the morning. Easy peasy. No, no, no. Something's shifted. And I don't know. And she's just screeching. And she's not telling me what's going on. Um, is it earache? Is it her teeth that are hurting? Anyway, it's just so funny because it is that like it's just so up and down. And then when they're tired, they're also like a little bit delusional, and so like they'll get really angry, and then they'll laugh, and then they'll start like hitting you. So no, it's funny. It's just great analogy. Thank you for that. Um, awesome. Well, Emma, I think I've touched on all the main things. It's been a bit of a different conversation. We did touch on Emmanuel Macron, which you probably didn't expect, but I think we touched on your public health stuff, the work you're doing at Grad Academy. I still can't say that properly. I'm sorry. And obviously at Bitcoin Mentor. And it's really wonderful to see someone plow so much energy into this thing on many different levels. Some folks are just focused on a certain category of people, but it looks like you really are doing work across all echelons of society. So really, really pleased to see that, and good work. Is there anywhere where you want to send people, Emma, if they want to just learn a little bit about you and the stuff that you've done? And sorry for calling you Emma. You could be Dr. Emma. You could run with that, eh?
I prefer Emma. Emma's great. Yeah. So where can you find me? I would say like Bitcoin Mentor would be the best place. Like just shoot an email, just sign up for a discovery call, and let's see how like myself and the partnership with Dream Grad can help you. I think that would be the greatest place. Some of my written works, you could just type in my name, Emma Apatu. I've written for Bitcoin Magazine, for example. Um, yeah, you can, and LinkedIn as well. I'm sometimes active on there, so that's another place that we can connect.
Brilliant. Awesome. Well, thank you for your time. And perhaps I will be visiting Canada next year. It's one of my plans. But I will need to make sure that I've got some long-term babysitters in the form of family to come and assist here back in Australia while Daddy goes on a business trip and then does some skiing. That's the plan.
There you go. There you go. Yeah, it would be great to meet you in person. Yeah,
Awesome. Thanks, Emma, and enjoy the rest of your day there. Cheers.
thanks.
All right, that's all we have for today. Thanks so much for tuning in. If you've got any suggestions or topics or ideas you'd like covered, or you just want to give me some feedback, hit me up at dale@whybitcoinshow.com or get in touch via Twitter at dale21m. If you want to support the show, why don't you just send me loads of Bitcoin? That'd be great. Or alternatively, just subscribe to the show, give it a 5-star rating, write nice things in the comment section, and share with friends or family. Whatever you think is best. Seriously, all support is most appreciated and welcome. And to anyone listening for the first time who's made it thus far, welcome. It takes a lot of time getting into Bitcoin, but trust me when I say Bitcoin is both difficult to see and impossible to unsee once discovered. Hope to see you again. Until next time, cheers.